What's up everyone? As we hurtle towards the second double eviction of Big Brother 23, the house guests continue to play hard, but one house guest ego may be getting a little too big. We've got so much to talk about, guys, so welcome to your live feed update. Alright folks, now right before we get started I will say this, we are getting closer and closer and closer to 10,000 subscribers, and it would make me just unbelievably happy if we could hit that before the season comes to an end. So if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button and also hit the like button, guys. I've been explaining this week. The YouTube algorithm is a weird thing that is very difficult to understand, but I know one thing for sure, hitting the like button does help me in my content, so I'd really appreciate that, folks, if you could hit the like button and also hit the subscribe button, because guys, we are so close to 10,000, which is going to be crazy when we get there. So please hit the subscribe button and please hit the like button. I'd really appreciate it. Okay folks, so we have a twist in the tale this week, and Kyland has been telling Xavier that he would obviously like Tiffany to be the target this week. He wants Tiffany to leave the house, which is obviously music to X's ears. However, this is where things get interesting. So Kyland has said to Xavier that he is considering pulling Hannah down off the block to build trust with her and put up Big D as the replacement nominee. That is something I didn't expect this week. I'm not even going to lie. I took a moment of silence there just to go like, wow, because this is going to be, if Tiffany can rally the votes of Arza and Hannah, then she's staying, which is crazy, right? But Arza seems to be playing both sides, and she doesn't want to piss off Kylan, so she'll probably just vote how Kylan wants her to do it. However, Tiffany can definitely get Hannah's vote for sure, and she can also potentially get in Arza's ear, which will be interesting. Obviously, this hasn't even happened yet. The veto meeting is scheduled to happen today. So if Hannah does come down off the block and Big D goes up, then we could potentially see Big D going home this week. It's unlikely, but listen, we've seen Tiffany work the house before. We've seen Tiffany work her magic and persuade people to do the things that she wants to do. But of course, this is the most crucial moment Tiffany has had to face in the house, because she has been fighting for other people's lives before and has shown to be successful sometimes and sometimes unsuccessful. But it really comes down to the question, can she fight for her own life, and can she do it successfully? We talked about on yesterday's live feed update that Tiffany started her apology tour with Arza, and then she continued it talking to Xavier, and she was talking to Kyland. She is really trying to smooth things out, and I respect this. As a fan of the game, I do respect this a lot, because I always talk about the All-Stars from last year, see my quote-unquote All-Stars, and how they didn't really do much when they were, I guess, their back was against the wall and they were likely heading out the door. They kind of just sat down and moaned and cried. Quite a few of them anyway. There's one person I've got in mind the most, and that person is Kevin. I talked about this the other day where I was kind of saying I feel like Kevin moaned and cried quite a lot when he was the one who sent down all of his allies. He had people willing to help him, and he just shoved them under the bus to the Cody Brigade, and they were all sent out the house. So I have no sympathy for Kevin in that regard. But people aren't playing like Kevin this year. People are actually standing up and going, do you know what? Whilst I'm likely going out of the house this week, I'm going to apologise to people. I'm going to do this. I'm going to offer these people this. I'm going to give this person a hug. Just to try and smooth things out, make the social game better. Just to better the chances of staying. Even though the chances are incredibly slim, why not increase that 1% to a 2%? It doesn't harm. Listen, you're in the Big Brother house likely once in your life. We may see some of these house guests come back again for a returnee season, whether it be an All-Stars or just a second chance or something along those lines, but majority of these house guests are only going to be in the Big Brother house once in their life, and it's good to see them trying and being in that perspective. However, I do think if there was going to be a returnee, Tiffany would likely be one of them. I do think likely the returnees we will see, if anybody's actually wondering, I do think it will be Derek X will probably make a return. If this is if, remember guys, it's not a definite, but if it's an if on a returnee, I think Derek X will return. I think Claire might return, and I think Tiffany might. Potentially Hannah, but I would say Tiffany, Derek X and Claire the most likely. And it's weird because I would say potentially Big D, but he hasn't done much game. He's been more of the entertainment. So potentially Big D, but I would say unlikely. I would say the three I just mentioned there. But either way, I'm glad to see people playing like they've got their one shot in the house. It's the one shot that they've got, and they're going to do all that they can to try and stay. And even though Tiffany is likely going to be leaving the house this week, I'm glad to see her, trying to lay the groundwork of her trying to stay in the house. There's a lot of trying because nothing's a definite right now, but I appreciate the trying and I appreciate the effort, because that's what all we ask for in a Big Brother player. The worst thing we can see in a Big Brother player is when they lie down and do nothing and cry their way out the house when they didn't even try anything. So thank you, Tiffany, for actually trying. Now, there was a point in the day where Big D, Hannah, and Arza were sat in the living room and they were talking about Derek X and talking about kind of entertainment and stuff like that. Pardon me, folks. And kind of saying, Derek X was really entertaining and all that sort of stuff. And Big D was kind of shooting that down and bogging it down and kind of saying, he was the biggest entertainment guy. And he was kind of saying, I'm the person who makes the room laugh, and Derek X really wasn't that person. He was saying, yeah, he's entertaining, but not as big. It was really kind of showing his ego, and it was kind of, I don't want to say disrespectful, but I mean, like, it really was kind of egotistical. I mean, like, it doesn't harm to be humble in those situations, It doesn't harm to be humble at all and kind of show, 2 people can be entertaining, or 3 people, or 4 people. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room, to be the most relevant person. Or you don't even need to be the most relevant person. I just didn't think there was any need for him to go on like that. He even went out to say, I don't even think Derek X is on my level. And I don't think there was any malice in it, but I think it was kind of a bit rude. And then he went on to, and then I think Hannah said, so who is on your level? And he said, no one. And I get it, Big D is the joker, he's the fun guy, but I don't know. I feel like there was a little bit of truth in there. Whilst he wasn't only joking, I feel like there was that level of, I feel like I'm above you guys, I think, sometimes, or I'm above Derek X, or I think I'm more entertaining than Derek X. And I don't know. I feel like they were both entertaining in their own ways. But I think there's ways to credit Derek X. There wasn't. It didn't need to be a I'm funnier than you contest, or you're not on my level contest. Just there's a different way to deal with it. Ways of being humble, and then there's ways of being a bit rude. And I think that was a bit of a rude situation. Tiffany finished her apology too with Big D later in the day, just before dinner. That is obviously the one that I would say that's the most rocky relationship of the lot. Of course, I would say she had a little bit of a rocky relationship with Arza about halfway into the game, and then also Xavier last week especially, but Big D, it's kind of been whoa the whole way through. So I mean, that was definitely a rocky one that she needed to patch up. Anyway, the house guests had dinner. Arza made pizza for everyone, which was really cool, and everybody seemed to really enjoy it. And then begins Kylan's one-on-ones that we've all been waiting for. Not at all. Let's talk about Kylan's one-on-ones, folks. So Kylan kicked off his meetings with Arza and kind of said, look, I'm kind of thinking of putting Big D up on the block and sending him out the door. So things twisted for a little bit there. But then Arza twisted the notch back and said, I am not voting Big D out over Tiffany or Hannah. It's not going to happen. Arza seems joined at the hip with Big D. At this point, they have been jokers. That literally that has been their team. And they seem extremely tight. And Arza's not going to scum him over. She's not going to cut his throat. And to be honest, it's probably the best game move because, yes, you can likely beat Big D in most certainly any competition, whether it be mental or physical. And Tiffany is the strategic mastermind of the season in many people's eyes. So, and I guess to add on to that, Big D is not the strategic mastermind in anyone's eyes. So, I would say anybody sat next to Big D on the block, it is probably a good idea to get rid of the person who is sat next to Big D because Big D is not a threat at all. I mean, he could probably make a case in the final. If somehow, I saw somebody throw this scenario out, I think it was on Twitter yesterday, said something crazy could happen where I think it might have been Ovi actually from Big Brother 21. I think he put this out there, which was kind of funny. He said, imagine if this is the scenario where somehow Big D wins the final 3 head of household competition, and it's Big D, it's X, and it's Arza. Big D decides to cut X, and then Big D and Arza make it to the final 2, which obviously in many people's eyes probably wouldn't be a deserving final 2. But then the jury decide to award Big D the money and the title of Big Brother champion because he was the person to cut X. I mean, that is crazy shit, guys. I mean, that could happen. I mean, we've seen stranger things happen in Big Brother, and Big D winning the final 3 HOH could be on brand with Expect the Unexpected. And I guess, I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I guess he would deserve to win because it's almost like he kind of slayed the top dog in that way, whether it be Tiffany or whether it be X in the final 3 with them, or Kyland or even Hannah. If you slayed that person, then and it's Big D next to Arza, then what can Arza make for a case? She played a steady floater game throughout the whole game, and I don't discredit a floater game because floating is a talent. June song, Big Brother 4, check it out. But I don't think Arza has been somebody that you can go, wow, she played a June game. she has played a mediocre social game, and mediocre social game and mediocre floater game, in my opinion. Big D has done exactly the same, but at least Big D has worked his social game as being the entertainment guy, and if he decides to be or he does become the person that cuts that person, then the big person, then I guess he would deserve the win if it's those two in the final two. Same goes for Arza. If she was the person to cut the big person, then I guess she deserves the win. It's kind of a crazy scenario to think through. I would liken it to, if you guys watch Survivor, I'm sure a lot of you do. If you all have seen Survivor Edge of Extinction, cast your minds back to the final four on that, when we had Chris, who would go on to become the winner, and he won the final individual immunity challenge, and he decided, if Rick Devens, I'm sure a lot of you remember that legend because he's one of my favourites, if not my favourite person in Survivor history. Shout out to Boston Rob, I like him as well. But Chris decided, if I take Rick Devens to the final three, he's going to win the game. So what's the point in me, putting Rick Devens against, I don't know, Julie or Gavin in fire making? If you all haven't seen this season, it's probably going to sound like gobbledygook, but I would recommend it a lot. So he decided, I'm going to take the immunity necklace off my neck, I'm going to give it to Julie, and then Julie and Gavin automatically make it into the final three, and he decided to take on, I guess, the giant, Rick Devens, in the final four fire making. He beat out Rick, he took the big person down, and then he won the game because he was the person to do it. Julie and Gavin had played the game all season long, but they weren't the person to take out Rick Devens. Chris was the person to do it, which gave him the case to win, and that's exactly what can be applied to this season. If Big D or Arza can basically do not much all season long, but then if they can take out X or take out Tiff in the final three, then that's enough of a case to make them the winner of Big Brother 23, which sounds crazy, but it's true. Now, I'm not going to go through every single Kyland meeting because I think this video would probably go on for about 3 hours and 42 minutes if I was to do that. So I'm just going to pick out some little bits here and there that seem relevant because, as I've said multiple times, when it gets down to the wire and there's not as many house guests left, a lot of the talks are a whole lot of nothing. They go on a while, but it's kind of stuff that has been kind of regurgitated for days and weeks on end because everybody's kind of got their end game in plan anyway, and unless it's old school Big Brother, none of those plans really change. So Kylan was talking to Tiffany for a bit, and not only talking to Tiffany, they were cuddling whilst they were having their meeting, and it was kind of insinuated by Kylan that Tiffany would be staying on the block. She kind of knew that already. She kind of seems to have a good read, and she's likely going to be heading out the door this week, like we said, because she can't consolidate the Arza vote. And even later in one of the meetings, I forgot to mention this actually, Kylan talked to Xavier, and then he went back on what he said about pulling Hannah off the block and said he's going to leave the noms the same. But I think with Kylan, it's going to be a lot of back, forth, and we don't know what he's going to do until it actually comes to the veto ceremony today. So who knows what could happen. But I would say in most scenarios, whatever happens, whoever comes off, it's going to be Tiffany leaving the Big Brother house first this week in the double eviction. But then as for who leaves second, that's going to be the interesting part. And it could be anyone's game. But I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on who you would like to leave the Big Brother house this week, because I know everybody's got different opinions. Everybody's got favourites within the crowd. Everybody's got least favourites. Who would you like to see? Which two house guests would you like to see leave the Big Brother house this week in the second double eviction of Big Brother 23? That is all of your live feed updates for today, folks. I thoroughly hope you all enjoyed watching. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below on this week so far. Are you happy that Kylan has HOH for the third time? Essentially the fourth, because he kind of controlled Sarah best, but the third time this season. Are you happy that Tiffany's on the block? Are you happy that Hannah's on the block? Would you like to see either of them come off the block? And who would you like to see go up on the block if one of them does come off? And who would you like to see head out the door, like I just asked there, folks? I'd love to hear all your thoughts, folks. So please let me know in the comment section below. But folks, I will say as I always do, make sure that you're staying safe, staying positive and staying healthy out there, and be kind to one another. Alright folks, that's an important one. But folks, in the meantime, please don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. But until your next live feed update, I've been your host Tom Vasey. Good night.